Life in 3 dimensions got me bending, got me twisting. I know I done said a lot, but I should probably stop pretending. I don't really hold the key and I can't really push a button. I just step up to the mic and try my very best to bust it, but I ran out of breath. It's tight in my chest, my feet just might fail. I can't stand the pressure.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to Racially Speaking, where we have real and honest conversations about race as it's viewed through the lenses of faith, family, and vocation. As always, I'm your host, David Phipps. And also joining me today, my prodigal co-host, the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. 2 Chains, Mr. The Social Justice Cowboy, Mr. Wyatt John Mark Walker. What's going on, brother?
What's up, man? Good to see you.
You too.
Good to be back on this mic.
So, I mean, it's been a long time. Obviously, we talk, pretty frequently, not on the podcast, but for the listeners, let's do a little bit of pleasantry since it's been a minute.
Yeah.
Okay. First, let our listeners know, John Mark, you're dealing with, as we're recording this, a thunderstorm. So hopefully we don't lose power.
Yes. Yep. Thunderstorm.
Had a little bit of Had a little bit of obligatory technical difficulty getting on here, but here we are.
Yeah, of course we did. Yeah.
I mean, let's do some pleasantries, but obviously we could talk for hours and catch up on both relevant and not relevant topics on here. But I'm reaching my back pocket for this one. So did I make this up or did I dream it? Did you not text me during the NBA playoffs at some point telling me that you watched a Lakers game?
I did.
You did?
I did.
Okay.
Yeah, I did. One game.
Why?
It was fun.
Okay, why did you, what situation were you in where you were doing that?
With my work, I was on a retreat, and so we put the game on, and I am always a wannabe NBA fan. Like, I want to follow the games, but I just don't have it in my mind or great in the schedule or any kind of thing where I know when the games are on. So I just always miss them.
Sure.
So I just happened to be watching a game, and it was really fun, and I enjoyed it.
So how was
one year? I'll be a real NBA fan.
How was the experience? It was Lakers, right? Playoffs.
Yeah. I'm 99% sure it was Lakers.
So you're right. I mean, that's like the heart of controversy and contentious topics because you were watching the Lakers and LeBron.
Yeah.
So,
any
back and forth commentary with your mixed company that you picked up on that you want to ask me about?
No,
because I'm not afraid to put someone in their place.
No commentary about that. I did watch Air though. Speaking about basketball.
Yeah. Okay. Me and Caitlin watched that. Yeah, the movie Air.
Okay.
What'd you think?
That was fun. I loved it.
Yeah.
I loved it. I think it has moved my needle from, maybe LeBron James is the best player of all time to I think Jordan is the best player of all time.
Okay.
And I don't think he's going to be dethroned.
Okay.
So
that is interesting because
yeah.
I think that, I mean, this is, I would have to go on too much of a rabbit trail, especially to someone, I don't mean this to sound condescending, but to someone that doesn't know a ton about the NBA. But see I love the movie, but I knew that that movie was going to make more people think this. And to me, okay, here's my 2 cents because I can't resist.
Go for it.
I don't think that has really anything to do with the typical arguments that people make for MJ remaining to be the GOAT. I think, like, obviously, I still think he probably is. I think it's honestly with LeBron, even though the Lakers got eliminated, spoiler, didn't win the championship.
Spoiler.
LeBron was on, LeBron didn't get a ring, blah, blah, blah. I don't think that innately made the needle move further him away from being the GOAT. I know that sounds ridiculous.
I'm not saying that.
But
I just didn't know.
Right.
Go ahead.
I just don't think, I think everyone wants to talk about the on the court stuff when it comes to Jordan because he's not, doesn't have the best reputation off the court necessarily. I'm not saying he's a terrible person, but
he's just a selfish dude.
Compared to LeBron, it's night and day. But because people love to say, oh my God, like I can't believe anyone would even mention somebody in the same breath as MJ, like LeBron, they say, well, let's talk about on the court. And I'm like, oh, what? Okay, well then why does the, Air, oh my God, he's got the biggest shoe sales still ever, and he's been retired for 20 years, whatever. Like, I was like, well, I thought it was about on the court stuff. Like, what does that have to do with, so I'm just like,
Yeah. I hear you. I just think I didn't know how much of an impact he had on the game itself, on the sport itself.
Yes.
And because I never watched Last Dance.
Right? Oh, you didn't?
No, I didn't. I just didn't know that. Yeah, but I still, LeBron is a better guy. so I don't know. Maybe I'll see a LeBron James documentary or a LeBron James movie or Space Jam 2, and I'll be persuaded the other way. But it moved the needle. I'm not saying I'm not Team LeBron, but I'm just saying it did move the needle in favor of Jordan.
Okay. Yeah. But, you're entitled. Yeah. Everyone's entitled to their opinion, And
that, as a non-NBA fan, I'm not.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll talk some off mic, and then I'll see if I've changed your mind. Not to change your mind that it's got to be LeBron. I'm just saying, like, this over romanticizing of Jordan just kills me. People that know me well, basketball people are like, yeah, will you ever stop? The answer is no, but
no, they'll never stop. That man, yep.
Yeah.
He can play.
I mentioned this before we hit record, but I see the Mario Lego set behind you. You know, I'm not going to lie, man, I'm a little disappointed, but you haven't seen the Mario movie yet.
I have not seen the movies. Have been hard lately. Hard to get to. I watch them when they come out on my TV, but it's just, hard to get to in person.
Right.
Yeah. I hear good things. There are so many movies. I haven't seen Into this. What is it? Is it Into the Spider-Verse? The most recent.
Okay.
I don't even know the title of it.
Okay.
But I'm like dying to go see it.
Right.
That's my next up movie. But I love movies. I usually just watch them at home now. So I'm behind the times consistently.
Yeah. Well, look, it's crazy. Like, I mean, back in our day, what was like 6 months in between theater releases and like VHS, and now it's like a week. Like, it'll leave the theater, if it even goes to theater. It's like, oh, Disney Plus, like tomorrow. And I'm like, what? I thought I just paid $60 to take my family to see it. Which we go and we like, we don't want the movie theaters to die, man. Like, so we do make ourselves go sometimes, but it's expensive.
Either. But I used to go all the time, and now it's like, I probably go just as much because every week in the summer is a new blockbuster.
Right.
So it's hard to keep up. But
right.
Haven't seen that.
That's true.
But I did so this is completely different. Updated my life. I recently bench pressed 375 pounds.
That sounds like a lot.
I'm putting this out in public for the first time ever. I never post videos, never talk about.
Yeah, I was gonna say, where's you didn't give like the shirtless video, the high shorts, and
no, I haven't done. That's not me yet.
Was Meg spotting you in the gym and?
Yeah, but I just want to put it out there that I can bench press 375 pounds. It sounds like a lot because it is a lot. So I just wanted to share that. That is a recent update in my life.
Congratulations.
I didn't know it was a goal until I did it, and now I want to bench press 400 pounds.
Yeah,
so,
I mean,
next goal.
Naturally, I mean, even I know nothing, but naturally, I was like, I mean, you got to go for 4 now, just because.
You got to go for 4. Yeah, got to do it.
It's a nice round number.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'll be looking for the Instagram post later this week.
When I get to 400, I'll put it on Instagram.
Okay. Tag the pod.
Yeah. It'll be 6 more years. Just wait.
Oh man. So you haven't seen Little Mermaid yet either? I
haven't.
Okay.
I hear
we'll have
good things.
We'll have to do a lot of follow-up with some of these.
It involves the Little Mermaid and Prince Eric and Scuttle and Flounder and Sebastian. Mm-hmm. So I know the story a bit. I want to see it. I want to hear Halle Bailey sing.
Yeah.
I want to see it. But
Little Mermaid, Mario movie, Air. Highly recommend all 3. Really good.
Yeah. Good summer movies.
Really, really good stuff.
Yeah.
All right, man. We could keep going and going and going. I know. All right, let's get to the meat of why we're here. So, if you've been listening for a long time, maybe it's your first time. If it's your first time, welcome. But you heard our intro, real and honest conversations about race through the lens of faith, family, and vocation. And I'm going to emphasize real and honest. I think we always are on here. But with this particular topic, I don't know what we're going to name the episode yet. Maybe it'll kind of organically rear itself as we're talking. But we're focusing on accountability, John Mark. And what we mean by that, I'm going to kind of try and set us up a little bit. I think the word, there's maybe not a more appropriate word than accountability. I think when you're talking about the things we talk about on here, justice, we obviously focus on racial justice. And me and you've been talking and have noticed similar kind of trajectories, directions where, I don't know, social media, culture, politics, churches, organizations really, like where the times, I guess, that makes it sound old, but where the times are headed, I think as it relates to, 2016, 2020 to now specifically, which is where we talk a lot about anyway, where we're headed with these conversations in particular. And I think we're seeing a lot of calls for things like unity, forgiveness, quote unquote, which we're going to get into this, moving on. And we've had some discussions, but just even between the two of us on what we think people mean by these kinds of claims, I guess. And we're seeing articles, listening to sermons, hearing, speeches, all kinds of stuff that's kind of following along some similar lines of where we think racial justice conversations are at right now and headed. And we want to shed some light on some of these things. Is that kind of a good setup, John Mark?
Yeah.
All right. So
that's a good setup.
We have an extensive list of things. I won't say things we will hit on, but things that we could hit on. But knowing us, we won't get to maybe half of it, but we have a lot to go off of. And I think it kind of all falls under the umbrella of accountability and justice. So, all right, look, let's start here. So, racial reconciliation, diversity meetings, diversity groups. John Mark, we've been part of these over the years in churches, through work. And obviously, the nature of what we're doing on here, we're not opposed to having conversations about these things. In fact, we're very pro conversations on racial justice. However, we share a commonality that these spaces where we've, not this space, but spaces where we have taken or participated in these kind of situations, diversity meeting groups or justice, racial reconciliation discussion groups, stuff like that. Whoops, Siri, sorry. Have taken place, and we, I'd say, have had some overall harmful experiences, hurtful experiences, I'll say. And I'll speak for me for right now. Hurtful in a way that it's turned me off to those types of atmospheres. In fact, I've left spaces where those things were taking place. I've stopped leading them in certain contexts. And I'll say two things and then give it to you for a little bit. I've done that because of, or as I sit here, I don't really see anything having changed, if that makes sense, as I talk about accountability and this moving forward mentality. So I don't necessarily have a reason to go back to those same scenarios and places. And number two, I'm concerned that those types of situations are going to start to come back and arise as these places, whether it's churches, organizations, or non-religious places. That's just where we find ourselves a lot. I'm concerned that those things are going to become the norm again with little accountability of how they've been harmful and done poorly over the last 8 to 10 years. So that's, I think, a little bit, hopefully people are following where we're at right now as we're coming to this conversation. Thoughts?
Yeah. So, excuse me. I feel like we're at a point where what is it, 2023. George Floyd died in 2020, right? Has it really been 3 years? That's crazy.
Short 3 years.
Yeah, that's crazy. And it was like the second, I don't know if you'd call it a pandemic, but it was like like there was this sickness of racial justice, like George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, all prominent names of Black people who were killed around the same time and kind of sparked this whole wave. So it was like we were in two simultaneous pandemics, right? And everyone was on fire for some type of change, some type of racial justice and unity throughout the world. The world was watching the United States after George Floyd was murdered. And it feels like the world has slowly moved on, kind of pulled back away from wanting to progress towards actual change, actual difference in how police do policing. How we protect our citizens, especially our Black citizens. How racism, had conversation about how racism has arisen in our country. Like it feels like we're kind of pulling away and then wanting to talk about, go back to before that ever happened and get back into this kind of like, I don't want to say kumbaya moment. That kind of sounds cliche, but perhaps that is what people are wanting us to go to, a sense of like, just keep peace, just, maintain unity. And it's hard to have peace when we haven't really wrestled with harsh realities of racism.
Yeah.
And there's a quote, and if I try and say it, I probably will get it wrong. But it was from a Native American woman, and she was speaking with, I believe, a white Christian man who wanted to start a ministry in her area. And this Native American woman, she was also a believer, so she also believed in Christ, but was culturally Native American, whatever her specific culture was. And the man asked her, how can they start a ministry there, a Christian ministry? And she said, you can't. And he was taken aback. And she said, you can't until you have understand our culture enough to have stood in a puddle of our tears. And I thought that was really profound. The thought of getting to know the hurts of a people group so much that you are standing in their tears,
right? And
then you can move forward to some type of working together in a ministry or working together for some type of greater good. And I think I was like, wow, that's really profound.
Yeah.
I don't know who's done grieving over the death of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery. The names go on, right? I'm not done. Yeah. I'm not done grieving the deaths of all those Black men and women who have been killed at the hands of law enforcement or vigilante justice. And that's just part of the plight of Black people in our country. And that's just one minority group who has suffered under racism, right, in our country. And so we just haven't grieved enough, to me, to be having these conversations about, let's come back together. Let's be together. I say, go to the people who are grieving, sit and listen, sit in a puddle of their tears and listen. Stop asking the question about when it'll be time and just wait. You'll know when it's time. Yeah. Just wait. If you have sat long enough and grieved long enough, the time will show itself. So be patient. So I think that's what I would say. Like, you and I, and I'll speak, I think this is true of both of us, but we are very adjacent to white Christian spaces, right? I work for a predominantly, why do I say predominantly? It is a white Christian organization, right? I work for that. I grew up in that. So I'm very at home in these spaces. And like you're saying, I think these conversations are coming. I can feel them. I feel them, people wanting to have them again. And part of my job is to have these conversations. Yeah. But I'm at home in these conversations. And I don't know, like when I see Black and brown people leave spaces to go to healthier, emotionally, relationally healthier spots, I'm like, I'm like, great, get out of here while you can, like the movie Get Out. I'm like, leave. I hope that you find peace wherever you go. And for those who are coming back, I've said this to my wife, I don't want myself to be the bait in the mousetrap, right? Where because there is a brown person there, other brown people think, oh, this is a safe community. Yeah. I can let down my guard. I'm like, don't let down your guard. Come with me. I don't want to be the only one, but come with me, but don't let down your guard. Yeah. So there's, I don't know. I feel like, I hope that makes sense. Those are some of my feelings about where we are. Things haven't changed enough. We haven't progressed enough because we haven't grieved enough. We haven't acknowledged the hurt that happened in 2020, the hurt that happened in 2016, and then the voting for people who say some really disgusting things about Black and brown people. Mm-hmm. We haven't grieved and reconciled with that truth enough to be just getting back together and having these nice conversations about race. So
yeah,
that's what I'm feeling.
That was great.
What do you think?
No, that was great. I'm going to bring it back to that too. I mean,
okay.
I remember, I would butcher it worse. But I remember what you're talking about with that quote with that woman, and you can't start the ministry unless you stand in a puddle of our tears. I think it's helpful to see. So like on one side, I would see someone's pushback to that and just feeling helpless and being like, well, okay, I'll never be able to do that, so I should do nothing. Because I think that is some people's responses. I think it's fair in a sense I understand what that means, but unfair in a sense of, no, you're missing the I don't know if the right term is hyperbole, but you're missing the meaning of it. And I'll bring it full circle to what I mentioned with the racial discussion groups. People, when I was in those groups, there were some well-meaning people. Like some of them are listening to this, and that I'm not crapping on everybody that I was in those conversations with by any means. But overall, and I don't know if I've even overtly said this on the podcast, I've said it to people that really want to hear in person, but I started this podcast because I felt like a big need, a big void was happening in the spaces you and I are in, John Mark, where this kind of thing was not happening. I think people thought it was by having these discussion groups. I was leading some of them, and I just started to realize after every time we meet that why don't I feel like that was helpful, at least not to me or my other friends of color that were in the room. Why do I actually feel like down now? And then I coupled that with, I would have conversations with you or some of my other friends, obviously friends of color, about what we were going through. And we would talk for an hour or so just to check in on each other, just to really talk about what was going on, what we wish people understood, and all these things. And I realized I would leave those conversations thinking, wait, this is the kind of thing that people need to hear, but no one's here. It's just me. It's just us. It's just us two, or us three, or whatnot. Mm-hmm. And so I realized, okay, that some people don't want to know, and so that's fine. But I was like, there are plenty of people that are coming to these meetings, want to hear these types of conversations, but the atmosphere is not set up to do that. It was set up too much of, and we're going to get into this too much with the understanding that, okay, this is a group for everybody to share their feelings about how they feel about all, X, Y, and Z, racism, and all this stuff. And to be frank, that is not what they're for. That's not what they should be for. Mm-hmm. And I stand by that. Like, if you're listening to this, like church leaders, mission, like organizational leaders, stuff like that's not what those are for. Yeah. If it's supposed to be healthy, it's not. You don't go through a racial reckoning of 2020 and sit down to hear how white people are being affected by it. You just don't. Like, that is not the time. That's not the place. It's not.
That's well said.
And that's not hating on white people. It's just, it's not the time. It's not the time for white people to feel better or to explain where they're coming from. If they want to come, it's a place to understand the plight, the pain, the trauma that in that situation the Black community is going for.
If I could jump in right there, I think I think I have a helpful analogy. And then I want you to pick up what you're saying, but it's not that I agree with what you're saying. And it's not that we're saying white people don't have any feelings or emotions about any of these racial things, especially being white. Like there's a lot of guilt and shame that can be placed upon white people when we're having these conversations. And I think when you and I talk about this, we're not talking about like individual responsibility towards you individually have something you're responsible for, slavery or civil rights abuses or the death of George Floyd. Right, we're talking more systemically, right, culturally, or the country has responsibility has done wrong. I would say responsibility is different. That we're all responsible for moving forward towards racial justice, but we don't want to like say white people don't have anything to say or not anything to feel about this.
Correct.
But there's this when somebody is going through grief, when something has happened and somebody is like physically or emotionally hurt, whoever it happened to, that is the epicenter. And the closer you are to that epicenter, the more grief you have. So say, a spouse dies. Then the living spouse, the husband, is the one who's closest to that. And then a friend of that husband is one step removed. And then like a friend of that friend is a third step removed. And so the friend of the friend doesn't go dump all their grief about, oh, I'm so sorry you lost your wife. Like, it's so painful. The friend doesn't go and is like, oh, I'm so sorry. We had such good times. You let your friend, the closest person, grieve out. Everyone grieves out to somebody else. So when we're talking about like the experience of, we'll say, anti-Asian hate, when we see a video of that happening or we hear about that happening, I'm not going to go pour out my emotions of how much it's hurting me that I know that there are Black men beating up Asian or elderly Asian women or men to you, right? I'm going to let you grieve. I'm going to say, I hate it, but I'm not going to dump everything on you. And, when there's a video of the next video of a Black man being shot, you're not going to come and pour all your grief out on me. You're going to see how I'm doing. You're going to check in. So we grieve out. So in these types of meetings, I think it's helpful to go in knowing other people have things that I need to hear. They're going to grieve, and then I can take my grief somewhere else outside of this meeting. And I think that might be helpful for the white audience to understand that in these meetings, when they're done well, the grief, it should be a space for those who are most closely affected by it to grieve, and those who are not to listen. Yeah. So, that was a long explanation.
No, absolutely. That was a fantastic example and kind of, piggybacking off what I was saying, which I was already, we're both doing that. No, that's great. I think, and, listeners, stick with it. We are going to get to, I think, some practicality towards the end, because we're not just doom and gloom. We're not doing this episode to just complain, but more just to discuss where I think we're at, things are headed, and why it's so important to not let this just kind of coast by, that where we've come from since, we keep referencing 2020, but 2020, whatever, 2016.
It was a big moment.
That
was another moment.
We have quite literally put too much of ourselves into this, in this little space and platform, to let it go by without kicking and screaming, to not let that happen without some change happening. So, let's keep going. Some examples, are the Christianity Today article came out, I think, a month ago or so now. There's others like similar articles to it. It wasn't an egregiously bad article or anything, but we're bringing this up because it was one that, again, I even think it was well-meaning, and I don't want to sound lacking in compassion when I say this, but I thought, and I want to hear what you think, John Mark, even the title, what I think was, it's time to forgive each other for the sins of COVID or whatever, and move forward. It's this Christianity Today article. They've put out a couple that were like this, and I like some of the stuff they put out, but I thought it was very heavily focused on how difficult life has been for specifically white pastors in church. Like they reference like surveys and stuff of just how hard their jobs have been pastoring the church and the contentious church. And that says something to me, like a Christianity Today organization that's what they're putting out in this moment. You know what I'm saying? So like, I feel like it's lacking that in and of itself is exactly what we're talking about, lacking accountability. Like I'm not lacking in compassion for a Christian leader. We are some of them. Like I know in a way, like what that's like to be in a leadership position and then have weight on you of stuff you've mismanaged or just the weight of there being some really difficult stuff that you are responsible for shepherding. I just think that is an interesting thing to really focus on, because I think in and of itself it lacks some accountability of, okay, well, why has it been this difficult for them? And I'll be honest, like I just can't ignore that the culture has not prepared us for a 2020 in those moments. And a white pastor, quite frankly, pastors in general, Christian leadership, I'll even include us in that in some way, like is responsible for that. So it's almost like, like it naturally is going to be really difficult because of how unprepared or how conditioned we are to resist some of the things we were challenged with, specifically in that moment, racially speaking, COVID speaking, all that kind of stuff, like just completely deer in the headlights or completely ignorant or resisting. All that compiles, and I can't just help but think, well, that of course it was really hard. So I don't want to lack in compassion completely, but I've got to be honest, like seeing multiple articles focusing on that as the focus of what's been difficult about a 2020 moment is, I'll be honest, like it is frustrating and confusing to read sometimes. What are your thoughts? You read the article.
Yeah, I did. And as I recall, it was mostly about COVID, right? It was mostly about like the decisions around meeting in person, masks or no masks, like those types of things, right? COVID protocols, which was divisive. Like, people left churches, split churches over this,
which was not completely not linked to other cultural stuff.
Right. That's what I was saying. The article talks a lot about COVID, but I don't remember it talking much about the wake of the Black Lives Matter movement and the protests, not riots, protests that were going on at that time, which were also divisive. Right. If your pastor didn't address the death of George Floyd, that means something, right? Part of the reason we switched churches was because of the way that the church we were going to didn't say much about it at all.
Yeah.
And and it was us and a group of predominantly people of color, predominantly Black people of color, who kind of floated away during that time. But it also felt like a lot of those people who held the view that we should talk about racism also held the view that we should be distanced or have masks. It felt like those were the lines drawn, you know? So this article, I feel like it kind of ignored or downplayed or completely forgot about, it called it political things, but it didn't go into some of what are those reasons why we had such tension and such division in that time. And like going back to what I was saying earlier, I don't think a lot of churches, predominantly white churches, have really dealt with the grief of racism in our society to a point where they can welcome in people of color it feels like there was progress made. And maybe it was like undercover, right? What did Kanye say? Racism still going on. They just be concealing it. I don't always want to quote Kanye. You know, he's kind of a controversial figure. This was Kanye a long time ago. I did that on purpose. A long time ago. But you know, like it exposed a lot of things. When times of trouble comes, it shakes away all of the front that we're presenting, the nice shiny faces, the nice happiness, right? It kind of shakes it all away, and it exposed a lot of things about how far do we really care about what you say about Black people, right?
Yeah.
Does our country really value Black lives? And then it exposed a lot of lines, and it left a lot of these pastors with this huge hole in their thought process or their theology or whatever they were teaching. It helped expose them as like, I don't know how to handle this. Like, I only can pastor when times are relatively peaceful. There might not be peace behind the scenes. There might not be peace in people's lives, but you know, who shows up on Sunday, that's peaceful. And that's when I can pastor. And so there was an earthquake, and a lot of these pastors had to fall away. And I don't think it's hard to move on. The title itself, right, is like, it says it's time to forgive each other our pandemic sins, right?
Yeah, okay.
It's not even a question.
Yeah.
It's not even a question. It says it is time. It's time.
It's too much.
And I'm just like how can you tell somebody when it's time for them to forgive? You don't know what they've been through and all the things that were piled on. Right. It's not your job to play God in somebody's life and say, it's time for you to move on. You can't. So I know titles are like, that's what the editor does. So this is an editor thing. The writer might not have made that title. He may have, but So it's hard for me when I hear people say it's time to forgive.
It's a very individual, which I'll get into this too. It's a very individual thing to say to somebody. Like, I think it's okay if you're in a relationship with somebody to say like, yes, like, we're two Christian men, like we believe in forgiveness wholeheartedly. There is a time, like once a certain amount of time has passed, and that's subjective. It's time to forgive for sure. But to corporately say that, and I said this to you, I think today, but that the notion to say something like that is a little bit too, to me, it's a little too adjacent to two wrongs make a right type thing. Which, you know, the flip side, like we grew up hearing two wrongs don't make a right. So I think it's a little bit like saying that, it almost like it's like an equation, like, okay, things were contentious. It's time to move on. It's time to forgive each other. And it's like, without any specificity, which I know is a whole article, but it's just, it's not, like I'm saying, coming back to accountability. It's not specific on what happened. I'm really not trying to say, hey, me and to our listeners, like John Mark did nothing wrong in these conversations in the last however long. But it's hard not to read something like that and hear this. It's not just this article, but this consistent thread of, okay, we just need to forgive each other and move on. It's like, well, that's what I'm hearing is, you know, some things that we have all done that are wrong, and I don't like see it that way. I'm not saying I've not done anything wrong, but as far as what I know, not you, John Mark, but like, you know, a random person, like, what I know that you know about me or what happened is that you see that I left the space, or you see that like I am outspoken about racism now. And what I'm hearing is that's part of the contentiousness. So let's all just forget about it and move forward.
Drop it.
And it's like no. Like, that's not, I left, and many, as we've referenced, people that look like us have left spaces, have been traumatized, have been hurt, have dealt with racism egregiously, and dealt with silencing over these last few years to the point where it's been extremely traumatic. And I'll say life-changing. And it's come at the hands of some wrongdoing where there's been no accountability for. And so to say, like you said, to tell someone play God and say, let's move forward together is wrong. Like in and of itself, like is wrong. And so again, I'm not saying all that to say, hey, we haven't done anything wrong. Like we've done everything. I'm not saying we've done everything perfectly, but I'm not going to sit here and say, oh yeah, overreacted to everything. I think that's too often what people want to hear of like, okay, do you guys ever, the black and brown people finally admitted they overreacted to, 2020 or January 6th, all this kind of stuff. And I'm just like, that's like literally never going to happen. I'm not being stubborn. It's just, that is not what happened. If that's what people think was the sin that we need to forgive each other, like that's not right. I don't think. Along with that, I would love to have more conversations with people that think there's wrongdoing and doing what even we're doing right now and speaking up about this stuff. You know what I mean? Like I would love to hear some actual people tell me this. And I'm going to say one last thing before I turn it to you for again, but like, I'll paint with a broad stroke in my mind for 1 second. And it's, I want people to be brought together. Like I want there to be unity. I want that to be clear. Cause I think maybe people think we don't, I don't know. I want that to be clear. I do want there to be unity. If I were to look back at my texts, my DMs, emails, or time travel and go back to in-person conversations over the last few years, again, painting with broad strokes for a second of people on the right and left, this whole notion of we all need to get together and have these well thought out conversations, as as maybe like as angsty or upset I've been at times over the years, I've always, probably more than a lot of people would like, I'm always an open book and willing to talk about these issues. Like at the drop of a hat, if someone wants to, I'm there. Like I'm an open book. I have to be the nature of this. I'm not going to be a closed book in this. You can't be. The calls from people opposing who just want to have these conversations and that accuse people like us of not being willing to have these conversations. Like in my short or like singular experience in myself, I'm speaking for myself, if I were to look at old messages and stuff like that, like people opposing me posting something or speaking up about something along the lines of like racism and stuff, who quite honestly have, at times come at me aggressively, I have like done nothing but like arms up and just been like, all right, like let's talk, and like extremely like probably even uncharacteristically gentle, like entered into those conversations. More often than not, like way more often than not, nearly always when I respond, and maybe they'll respond once, then we'll respond, have like, I genuinely think like a good conversation. I was like, okay, wow, this is a good conversation with somebody who I vehemently disagree with. Ghosts me. Not even like, okay, I don't know if we can agree. It like gives me like a closure statement. Like we're not going to talk anymore. It's just like ghost me. I have like tons of DMs, like stuff like that. I'm just like, oh, well, so this whole thing of like, let's have these conversations. In my experience, I've tried and continue to try to have these conversations. And it's like, well, I thought we were having a conversation, and now all I can assume in that is you don't like what I said, or like the article I told you to read after I read your article, and then now you don't want to have a discussion about something. Like something isn't adding up. That's not everybody, but it's been a lot of people, man. Like if I'm honest, and so I think that's a problem.
Yeah. I have 0 DMs.
Oh, yeah, we did go over that. Do you know what a DM is, John Mark?
I know what a DM. I know what a DM is. But I have nobody reaches out to me. I mean, I'm happy to engage too, but you got to get me on that odd time I check my social media.
You got to post some more controversial stuff.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, that's also true. I do not post controversial stuff. Yeah. But I'm down to talk about it too. I'm here to have conversations. You got to. Like you said, we have to if we're going to be with this platform. We have to be available to talk to people who are willing to engage in good faith conversations about this. And I too would be curious to see, like, I don't know who this author is, but I would want to know more specifically what pandemic sins he thinks that people who protested police violence against Black people have, in doing that? Like, where is the sin in that? I'd be curious to hear, like, what needs to be forgiven. Maybe he wouldn't call it a sin. I think that's just, fancy language. But what needs to be forgiven in that protesting?
Yeah. I would love it. Would love the candid conversation.
I never protested in that time period, but I did go to see the Lee idol monument, taken down. I went to go see the Lee statue removed. And I'm curious, like, I'm sure that knowing that I went there and celebrated would probably rub some Christians the wrong way. And then there would be tension between us because I'm celebrating this slave owner coming down, but they're seeing this Virginia history, leader, man that they honor coming down. And so I'm curious, like, how this author would have us, would counsel me and that person to have a conversation about how do we come together in unity, around that. And so, I don't know. I'm curious.
I think Russell Moore is the editor-in-chief of CT now, which is I typically, not trying to elevate anybody, but agree with a lot of stuff he says on this stuff. That'd be interesting.
Yeah. Me too.
I mean, we could easily get him on here.
Let's give it a shot.
Oh, yeah. All right, let me ask one more thing, then we'll take a quick break, and then get into a few other things. Do you see thoughts on Black leaders, sometimes Black pastors, speaking to predominantly white spaces, and in the midst of that, putting down the Black community? Do you understand what I mean by that?
I do.
Okay,
yeah.
I listened to, as we both listened to a few sermons recently of, we're going to name the person right now because it's not super far removed from us, but great guy. Like, I think he does a great job, but is an example of something that he's not unique to him, but I see, and it's subtle. I think maybe people like us were going to pick up on it, but it bothers me. So, well-meaning, good, like, again, unifying conversation about race to Black and white audiences and congregations. Yeah. But I see this, what I just said of often, I just want to hear your thoughts. Like, they can say things sometimes that come off as, well, it sounds like you're putting down your community in front of all these white people that I know you're not egregiously meaning to, but it feels like it's like, whoa, why are you? It feels like he's having a conversation that he should be had behind closed doors with the Black community.
Yeah, I think I'll say it this way. I think when someone of a cultural minority or ethnic minority or racial minority group, in this case, a Black man, gets up and speaks in front of a white audience, they have a responsibility to represent their race, cultural community in the best light possible. Because, and this is a problem with how people view people, but because majority culture audiences, whenever they hear a Black person say something, they're like, "Oh, all Black people believe that," right? They're good at tokenizing Black people, people of color, and making them representative of their entire diverse culture, community, people group. So they have a responsibility to present in the best light possible the people that they're representing and coming from, just because that is a reality, right? Will it always be so? I don't know. But that is what I'm saying. I think it's true. You got to present it in the best light possible. So I think what we heard was this Black man had conversation with some Black friends, and it seemed like they were also pastors. And they said, "When are you going to come home?" So he's a pastor of a predominantly white church. They're like, "When are you going to come home?" Meaning to a predominantly Black church where he grew up, right? And he said, what did he say? He said, I am, what do you mean home? Like, I am home. Like, this is home. This is family. This is home. And like, he said that in front of a white audience, but
well,
like,
yeah. Well, he
we
said,
know what he means.
I think it was worse than that, to be honest. Like, I think he
Right.
said, I am home, but he said, I am home because my whatever salvation or something isn't found in the something like the color of my skin.
Yeah.
And I just,
Yeah.
and I couldn't help but notice, and it was, it was a podcast, or it was a sermon, but it was on a podcast app, and
a lot of cheers.
That's the one time where I picked up on super loud cheers at a big church, and I'm just like, that he's got to read the room. Literally, he's got to know what what the white audience is taking from that. Like, to me, it's just it for him to be, which he is, like, honest and talking about his experience with racism and explaining that to people, coming back to like the diversity meetings or discussion groups, like sharing that with the white audience is helpful. But then to say, oh, and then it's again the two sides thing. It's then like everyone, like two wrongs make a right type thing. It's like, or two rights make, I don't know, but like you guys get it.
Yeah.
Like, but then to be like, and then the black community also did this, and I disagree with that. So like, I'm getting pushback from both sides. So that's a good thing. It's like, no, that's emboldening, giving people a pass to say like, okay, so black people did wrong things, white people are doing wrong things. We all just need to come together. It's like, no, that's not what he's saying.
Yeah. So my issue with that, like, he knows what his black friends were saying. They were saying, come back to the community, not leave Christianity, right?
The thing is, they could even be wrong, right? Like, I mean, I don't agree with, like, I get what he's saying. I'm not saying I agree with that person that said it to him. Right. But he's got to, like, white people don't understand the racial trauma that they are saying that from. Right. And so that's why I think it's problematic to say that at a predominantly white mega church. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Like,
yeah.
I keep cutting you off.
There's two things at play. He pitted being a Christian and that community against being black and that community. And those things are not in tension or in conflict. They don't necessarily need to be in tension or in conflict, right? Yeah. You can be black and Christian, and it doesn't matter which word you put first. That doesn't put priority on which one you are, right? Let's see. This might get a little theological for a moment, so bear with me. But as Christians, we believe that the Holy Spirit comes along inside of us and leads us, teaches us, guides us, directs us in how we should live, right? Kind of transforms us into being more like Christ every day, right? And so in the same way, for a community of believers to come together and be growing individually in that way, communally, we'll see things like love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, self-control be the fruit of a community that follows Christ, right? And that comes in to interact with our culture and makes those things shine through our unique ethnic cultural expressions or racial cultural expressions. But it doesn't conflict with them. It doesn't like make all of them just disappear. All of a sudden, you're just this blank slate without any culture when you become a Christian. But it makes everything shine and reflect the goodness of God back culturally, right? So they're not. I don't know what they're saying, but I don't. It's just when he said that, he made it seem like they were saying being black is more valuable than being Christian. And he just completely kind of ignored that he is at a predominantly white cultural space, and they're saying come back to a black cultural space, and he made it black versus Christian, but there is no just one Christian culture, but the culture of Christ infuses all cultures that it touches with goodness and light and love and all those good things that I just said. So going back to what I said, like if you are in front of a predominantly white audience, then you need to be extra careful with what you say, because they're going to think that all people that look like you believe whatever you're saying, that you are a representative. So it's family business. He was told those things in a conversation for black person to black person, and he brought it before people who don't understand the context, don't understand the culture, don't even understand the reasons why somebody would say that, and he just left it out open for them to be judged and condemned. And you got to keep family business. if they're not going to be invited to the cookout, don't tell them about the conversations at the cookout. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So, yeah.
Right. And I think he would probably say where they are invited. And again, this whole day stuff, we're not trying to uninvite people, but you just gotta.
Yeah. The cookout, I mean, it's
you gotta be wise.
Black conversations, black spaces.
Right.
That's what I mean by the cookout.
The whole, like,
I'm not saying like community altogether. Like, yes, you'll be invited into the lives of black people, but the most intimate points of where we need this space to hold racial tension, to talk about, have freedom to be black, to how to explain ourselves, or Asian, or whatever cultural expression you have. You need those spaces. And that's what I'm talking about. That happened in a black space, and he brought it before a white space.
Yes.
Nobody in that audience is ever going to be able to be in a black space like that, because they're not black, unless they're black, right?
Yeah.
And that's just it's just nature. It's not like they're being excluded from anything. It's just reality. Like, I can never be, if I ever enter into a woman's space, then I change that space. It's no longer a women's space.
Yeah.
It may be predominantly women, but it's going to be different because I'm there. So similarly, culturally, they're just not going to, you can't share what has happened in a private cultural space in a public broad majority culture space after that. So that's what I'm saying. That's what I mean by cookout.
Right. That did remind me of something. And again, we didn't name names for good reason. But again, a lot of what he said, I think, was fine. It did remind me, I think, this one is actually a little more egregious, I think, and I'd wonder what you thought. And it also reminds me of something else that I heard in a conversation a few years ago. But he also said, I think he gave the example of, being a black man having bought a house. I won't say where they live, but bought their house where they live now. I guess a predominantly white area, as a black man. And he essentially was giving, the example of he had been conditioned and taught to don't make white people feel uncomfortable. And so he talked about walking down his street, saw, a middle-aged woman, I think, white woman, gonna cross past him on the street. And so he just naturally crossed the other side so that nothing happened, or she didn't feel uncomfortable, or didn't get into any, kind of incident or anything. Again, same sermon, he's bringing that up. And I'd wonder what you think about this, was saying like he grieved that he did that, right? He was upset with himself that he did that, and he blamed, racism on it. But just, it was almost, he was kind of like beating himself up over it and beating the teachings. He thought that he like maligned that woman's character without even knowing her, like thinking that she would have had that thought. Like, he was mad that he thought that about her. And I get, I get the well-meaningness of like, don't judge a book by its cover, the old, thing we've always heard. But let's not be naive, like the Me Too movement happened too, right? That's something we also went through over the past, 5 years. Like, keep women safe, like at that point, I'm not advocating being colorblind, but in that situation, black woman, white woman, Asian woman, like whatever, I'm going to give her space because I'm a man and she's a woman out in public by herself, So like, I get what he's saying. Like, I want there to be a world where that doesn't have to happen type thing, but to say like, he's got to be, again, predominantly white space teaching on race. And this wasn't like a sermon where this is just a random thing he's talking about. It was like, that was what the sermon was supposed to be about. Is really problematic. Like, I think that it is problematic. Again, was ignoring the stuff that happens to black and brown people walking down the street or in neighborhoods, because in white neighborhoods, it does happen. Like, they end up dead. They do. Yeah. And so to frame it that he did something wrong. Again, I get it. Like, you shouldn't. I'm not advocating for judge people, but to just skirt around the cultural or like history, what's happened, even recent history of like, it feels a bit irresponsible. Yeah, it's complete, because that's again something that a white person who doesn't want to talk about this stuff or like admit that it exists is going to be like, oh, see, he doesn't. he doesn't want it to be this way, so it must not be this way. Like all the it's not
but
happening.
It is this way.
And I had I've heard different examples of that over the years. Like I heard I had somebody talk to me who's close with the police in my area, and talked to me at a cookout or something, speaking of cookouts, and was just kind of asking like I think how the podcast was going and stuff, and just said like, speaking of LeBron, was like, yeah, man, I'm just like, I can't root for LeBron anymore. And I was like, what are you talking about? I mean, I think I was honestly like, what do you do? Like basketball wise or something? Then he was like, just how he views police. And I think he had like tweeted something or whatnot, whatever. And he's like, yeah. He's like, and like, I know my friend is a cop. The other day he pulled over like a young black kid, and he like walked up to his window, and he's just like shaking, like on the steering wheel, like shaking and terrified. And he's like, that's just like that's he's already thinking about the police that way, and he's picking that way of thinking up from people like LeBron. And I'm just like,
that's sad. That's sad that he thinks it came from LeBron.
Like thinking that because people are speaking out about police stuff now, it's like, oh, that's why black kids are scared of police now. It's like you completely like you're like just over your head, like just a basic historical knowledge of what goes on.
That's sad. It's like had he never heard that black people have to have that police conversation? Other families talk about birds and the bees. We have to have those too, but we also have to have conversations with especially black sons about how to, yes sir, no sir, the police, how to survive an interaction with the police. Like not how to.
I remember
not how to just talk. But we have like, how do you survive? How do you come home from an interaction with the police?
To bring it full circle, I remember enough of the conversation that I did bring that up.
Did you?
And then this person proceeded to, again, it was like a very, as contentious as it sounds, it was a very like amicable conversation. But but we vehemently disagreed, obviously. But it was just stuff like that. I'm like, oh, gosh, man, like I don't. Where do I begin actually with this?
This is in the culture, right? I mean, and there's no one black culture, right? But one thing that's true of all black American cultures, people, families, is that we have conversations about the police. I mean, it goes back before Rodney King, but he's a prominent memory in I think the 90s that he was beat by the police, and it was recorded. It was one of the first times that this type of thing was recorded. And it's like, see world to see what the police are doing. But you can go back to the civil rights movement, right? Yeah. And then all the way to today, George Floyd, like, is it likely that every black person is going to be abused and beat up and killed by the police? No. But are you going to take that risk? You know what I mean? And I could share stories about my interactions with the police. Being followed, being pulled over time and time again in Newport News, 757. Just shout like, out. And I'm just like, what am I doing? Like, I feel like I'm driving like everybody else. Why me? And it's it's a reality. We can't, going back to what the pastor had said, we can't be naive, even if we want to be, especially if we have a microphone and people that we're teaching. We can't afford to be naive. And yes, he was talking about what he felt in his heart towards that woman, but I would be like, there are other cultural things at play besides what you think about her. And she might be thinking those things, and that's okay for you to have that thought, right? It's okay based on the history of race relations in our country and living in a suburban neighborhood. It is not absurd to think that a woman would have those thoughts about a large black man walking towards her, right? Yeah. This is what we're swimming in. So it is okay that you would take precaution in that moment until you know that this is your neighbor, she knows you, and things are at peace.
Yeah,
right?
I don't want to conflate things, but it's not completely different from I don't want my wife or daughter when she gets older to be in certain situations where she would feel unsafe around men. Like, I'm not going to say, look, don't believe the worst, just believe the best until proven otherwise. No, like proven otherwise could be extremely terrible. I'm okay with taking some precautions.
Yeah.
I think we mostly all understand this stuff when it's not about race all too often.
Right.
And I think some of it's so basic. I'm like, that's fine.
Yeah.
I don't think that guy, like the pastor, did anything wrong. I get what he's saying from a moral view and character view, but like you said, I think you're responsible. To bring it full circle with the transparency with conversations, this person with the LeBron thing and the police, I remember like I had a great conversation, and then later messaged me, said like, oh yeah, no, I'd love to like talk more. Sent me like an hour-long interview of this politician. He said, like, this person makes some really good points. Would love for you to listen to it. I did. I listened to the whole thing. Didn't take notes, do anything like that. I was like, yeah, okay, all right. I listened to it. Got back to him. I was like, hey, listen to it. Love to hear what your thoughts on it were. Discuss it. Just let me know. I didn't like put all my eggs in that basket. Like, oh my God, I can't wait to do it. Like, he's definitely going to respond. But I thought we were close enough. Like, had a long enough conversation. I'm like, this could be interesting. This would be a good opportunity to have these conversations that everyone wants to have. And crickets. So I'm just saying, like, I did the work. I watched the video. That was not something I would have watched before. So it's like, yeah, I'm going to hear this out. I had no problem like figuring out. Like, it was extremely easy to see what he wanted me to see and to know what I disagreed with, but that's fine. But crickets. And so it's just, like what I've gotten, I'm left thinking, okay, would I have had crickets if I would have said, hey, man, you're right. I'm convinced. Thanks for the video. Loved it. What was I thinking? Let's meet. Like, probably not. I think he would have been, let's get together now. So anyway. All right, John Mark, we're a little over an hour. So I'm going to call what's called an audible. Listeners, we're going to break this up in two parts because we got a little bit more talk about. We don't want to cut it short, but also we don't want to expect you to listen for an infinity amount of time. So you guys, thank you for listening. We really hope this has been helpful. If you are interested to hear more on this topic, please, I don't know if both will be out at the same time, but either click over to depending when you're listening, or be on the lookout for part 2 of this conversation. Thank you guys. The music you're listening to was done by our guy Dylan Dent. Our artwork was created by Ashley Bush, and we'll see you guys over on part 2.
The nightmare might scare you no worse than reality. They hunt you by day, R.I.P. Ahmaud Arbery. Everybody got a time, but that's less than comforting. I hope I'm alive by the time they choose to comfort me. Mosquitoes in the vein, or leeches on my soul. This money on my mind is a fracture in my bones. You get crippled by continuing existence like a ghost. And they wonder why we drink, and they wonder why we smoke, and they wonder why we think that everything's a joke. I'm shocked that we can sleep, must be the thought of letting go.